What's up, guys? I just want to get on here and give you guys an update on what's going on and my thoughts about all that's going on right now in Ukraine. As you guys heard last night, Russia has officially declared war on Ukraine, and the Ukrainian people, they're trying their best to evacuate out the country and they're trying to stay safe, but a lot of them are still stuck on site. There's missiles firing everywhere, there's jets, there's tanks moving into places. Like, it's crazy, right? Putin is definitely he's a piece of shit for this one, right? He's basically a warmongering lunatic, and you know I don't know why anyone would idolize this man or would seem to think that this man is a good person in any kind of capacity. It's all bullshit. All these politicians, man, they see, that's the thing about war. When you have war happening, the little people hurts. The little people is the one that suffer, right? The people that has nothing to do with it, that wants no part of this, the regular people that work their jobs, that have families, they're the one that gets hurt, right? And the big fish, the politicians, the kings, they're the ones that get to sit back and enjoy the profit of their warmongering tactics, and they don't want to get to push the propaganda. They incentivize these things, right? They want these wars to happen, and it's fucked up, and none of us should be okay with that. And we need to stand with Ukraine, because they, and the crazy thing is, the Ukrainian government has, a few years back, has agreed to give up their nuclear weapons in exchange for basically protection, right? And Russia was one of the countries that was supposed to protect them, because Russia is right next to Ukraine, and they speak the same language. It's they're like neighbors, and the Ukrainian people have no idea why Russia would be doing this right now. It's like the biggest stab in the back. It's the biggest betrayal. It's just like, why are you doing this to us? And what can I say? Putin, he just woke up one day and just, well, I'm sure he's been planning this for a long time, and we'll get into that. But basically, yeah, Ukraine, we need to stand with Ukraine, and that's the bottom line. So what's going on right now is basically, I think this is all pretty much in relation, in consequences with the fact that Russia and China are basically trying to undermine the United States power. Throughout all these years, the United States they always had the power, because we have the U.S. dollar, the global reserve currency, and so the U.S. uses that to impose sanctions on countries that do things that are deemed to be evil in their eyes, right? So the U.S. pretty much played the judge, the executioner, and all of that, and they've always been the big brother, right? But as we've seen in the past, China and Russia is basically, they have been wanting to get off the US dollar standard for a long time, because, as you know, everything in the world has to go through the dollar, because that's why it's the global reserve currency. Like, if two countries want to trade with each other, they have to go use US dollar. They have to go through US banks. So the US is pretty much involved in every single trade there is around the world. And that's what gave us so much power, because we have that status of controlling the global reserve currency, and Russia and China, they don't like that, right? So they've been planning and plotting to get off the US dollar standard. And and I think this is one of the main steps for them in order to execute that plan. And I think China is going to invade Taiwan next. They already have jets in place. It's all happening at this point, and like I said, it's the little people suffer, more than anything. The price of oil is going through the roof. As you guys know, Russia is the third largest global oil producer in the world. So the U.S. gave up our basically energy independence a while back. So now we're dependent on other countries to give us these resources, and Russia is one of them. And they know they have that power. They know they hold that control of us, especially with inflation been running high and the gas price been so high in the United States that Biden try to ask countries like Russia and Saudi Arabia to ramp up production of oil in order to have more supply coming into the U.S. so that they can curb the price of gas before his midterm election. But Russia and the Saudi Arabia pretty much said, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to give you more oil. And that was the start of it all, so to speak, right? Roughly. But anyway, so then now we know that that is happening. I have a lot of things on my mind, and I just don't know. I mean, I'm only one person, and there's no one person that could pretty much dissect this whole situation completely and fully and have the perfect answer, have the perfect prediction as to what's going to happen. Nobody knows, right? This is war, man. Like, most of us have never lived through war in our lifetime. But I do think that, man, we're getting close to a stage of something about to happen, and I've been reading about this and learning about this. It's called a fourth turning. It's basically a time of change, a time where the cycle of everything has to, like, the old has to die before the new can be born, kind of thing, and so, we had we had the COVID pandemic, and then we had inflation going through the roof. The economy is just being propped up on money printing, just unsustainable money printing. It's gonna crash at some point. It has to crash. That's just the way it works. It's just the Fed, they're printing money as fast as they can, as much as they can, more and more every time, in order to keep the market up, because they don't want the stock market to crash. They don't want the economy to crash. And, Biden is pretty much doing whatever the Fed says at this point. He's just like, just print, do whatever you got to do. Because no president wants the economy to crash under their regime, under their reign, right? Like, every president's going to sweep under the rug, and they're just saying, basically, just print, do whatever you want until I'm out of office. Then the next guy can deal with this fucking problem, right? So that's what every president does. Biden, Trump, they would have done the same. Now, I could argue that Trump would have printed less money because he's, Republican, and they tend to be more conservative when it comes to, acquiring more debt for the country rather than a Democrat, right? Because they're more liberal with it. But, that's speculation at this point. But anyways, the point is, with all of this going on and all of this money printing, and if you follow the money, you just see where the world was going to go. And I have a close friends list on Instagram where I've been posting all of my, not prediction, but basically what I think is going to happen, right? I knew that the Fed was going to keep printing money, and it's like they're stuck in the corner right now at this point, because they have inflation going up, and the regular people, the regular citizens, are basically crying to them, saying, please do something, right? Curb this inflation, slow it down, do something, make it go down. This is crazy. And then they have, on the other hand, the billionaires, the companies, the corporations, that's just telling them, no, we need to keep printing money to sustain the stock market, because if it crashes, then the economy crashes, everything falls. So it's like, which one do you pick between the two evil? You want to keep inflation going up so that the economy can continue to be ran basically on fake money printing. That's basically all you're doing. It's just like a sugar high. There's no substance behind any of it, right? So do you keep it like that? And then the regular people just is going to riot and revolt one of these days because they can't afford groceries anymore? Or do you try to curb it, try to slow it down? Because in order to bring down inflation, they have to stop printing money. They have to reduce the money printing process. But by doing that, the stock market's going to collapse, and the economy is going to collapse. And then now everything's going to get shut down. Now we're going to go through a recession. So it's, the Fed is stuck between a rock and a hard place, so to speak, right? They don't know what to do. They're stuck in the corner. And like I said, they can't stop printing. It's like the money printer, the government and money printing is like, it's like crack. It's like smoking crack. They gotta have it. They're addicted. They can't stop. And the more they smoke, the more they have to smoke, right? You can't take a smaller dose. You have to increase your fix every single time. And that's what they're doing. They have to keep printing more. And the more they print, the more they have to print. Because as soon as they stop, everything collapses. But I mean, that's how it has to be. You have to go through another crash in order for everything to rise up again. It's basically the cycles of the market. Everything runs in cycles, right? So the economy has to crash in order for us to recover from all this money printing, all this unsustainable money printing. The economy has to crash before it can go back up again, before we can go back to normal stage again where we can rebuild, right? It's just how it is. It's kind of like, smoking crack. If you want to, or meth or whatever, if you want to get clean, you have to go cold turkey, and then you're going to go through a period of withdrawal, and you're going to feel like shit, and you're almost going to feel like you're going to die. But then once you get over that, you get better, and then you can, start from a clean slate, start from scratch. And that's what's basically the analogy for money printing. So, with all this going on, I mean, war is just another incentive to print money. It's just now there's a reason for them to say, okay, now we can't stop printing. We got to keep printing because how else we going to deal with this fucking war, right? We don't have any money. So then they have to keep printing money. Now it kind of gave the Fed an excuse to say, all right, well, we know inflation is bad and we was going to try to fix it. But as you can see, there's a war now. So, we can't do nothing. So sorry, guys, we have to keep the inflation high so that we can keep printing money. And that's what's going on. If you follow the money, you can see what the incentives are. You can see it. You can see why people do the things they do, why politicians do the things they do. It's like, what's driving them, right? Like, what's driving them? What's the reason? Don't listen to what they say. Watch what they do. Watch the money flow. See where the money is going. And so I kind of knew that it was going to happen. They needed another reason. Like I said, the pandemic was over, right? They had to print. You can argue that the pandemic was planned or whatever. I'm not going to get into all that. That's a conspiracy. I don't care, right? Whatever. It happened. The economy got shut down. The entire world got shut down. We started printing money like never before. We have never printed this much money before in order to, sustain the economy. Because if not, then we all would have went straight into a recession, depression, whatever you want to call it. So we had to print. But as soon as we started printing that much money, now we can't stop. Now we can't just be like, okay, we're just going to print less now. No, you have to keep printing more. So now that the pandemic is officially kind of over, right? Like, nobody cares anymore, right? We all know COVID is no longer a threat. They have to find another reason. And now it's war. And then now in Biden's eyes and in the government's eyes, it's like, oh, okay, well, now if the market does crash, we can blame it on the war. But really, it's not. Really, it's because of the way you guys been handling your monetary policy, the way you guys been printing money and just diluting people's purchasing power and giving people massive inflation and just basically being irresponsible, just borrowing money, going into debt, $30 trillion in debt in M1, $60 trillion in M2. Come on. $60 trillion in debt in the United States alone, $300 trillion in debt globally. It's not sustainable. So when the market does crash, when the economy does crash, now they got a scapegoat. They got something to blame. But with all that being said, I don't know how this war is going to play out. And now let's talk about Bitcoin because, as you guys all know, I'm a Bitcoin guy. I'm a huge believer in Bitcoin. What do I think is going to happen? I think short term, maybe Bitcoin would take a beating just like stocks, just like everything else. Like right now, everything is going down. And when everything goes down, it's very hard for Bitcoin to rise. It's just how it is. It gets dragged down with everything else. You got to understand in these times of uncertainty, right? War, recession, market crash, whatever. People tend to go to cash. They want cash. They just want cash because it's safe. Everyone, not just the regular people. No, the hedge funds. They'll start offloading their positions. The whales. They'll start selling their fucking whatever their assets in order to get cash because that's safe. That's the safest option in this environment. So when they do that, they sell everything. So everything kind of crash, and then they'll buy back up. That's just how it was. How it was in March 2020 when COVID hit. If you guys remember, we had the biggest stock market collapse in a day, and then we had Bitcoin just. I think it went from 9,000 to 3,000. It was horrible, right? In one day, just. And then out of that crash, Bitcoin rose and went up the fastest and the strongest out of all the other assets, like always. So when it comes to Bitcoin, there's a lot of things that we have to consider here, right? Yeah, short term, we might see some more downside. But of course, I think that everything happens and it just makes Bitcoin stronger. The thing about Bitcoin is up until 2020, Bitcoin has been living in this environment where it's just everything was all good, right? Bitcoin was born in 2008. So after the housing market collapse. So it was born after the recession, right? And so ever since then, it's just been going up. And the whole market has been going up, 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 up. It just so happened that Bitcoin happened to go up the most out of all of them. So people have always wondered and questioned. They always said, well, Bitcoin was built to be this thing that can, be a safety port, so to speak, right? Like an insurance, and it's meant to be a safe place to go to hide against inflation, hide against the recession, war, all of this. But it's never been tested in that sense. So when 2020 hits and COVID hits, that was the first test, right? It was that, can it survive a pandemic? Can it survive something this crazy? And Bitcoin passed the test with flying color. Not only did we survive, we went up 3 times past the previous all-time high, and then now we're sitting at around double the previous all-time high in 2017. I mean, we passed with flying colors. We're the best performing asset in the history, even during the pandemic. So that's one test. And you gotta remember one thing about Bitcoin. The more stuff you throw at it, the more you put it through, the more tests that it endures, the stronger it becomes. The stronger it becomes in the eyes of investors, in the eyes of nations, where they just look at this thing and they're like, man, this thing really still here. It's still growing no matter what happens. How can this thing be that resilient? How can this thing still be here? So I think this is just another test for Bitcoin, and I think Bitcoin is gonna rise out of this spectacularly. Like this is gonna make Bitcoin so much stronger, because now it's like, whoa, you survive another test. And here's another thing that I gotta say about that. With like I said, the US, they tend to impose sanctions on countries that they think is not moving in the direction that they want, right? So they basically, when they impose sanction, they cut you off from all the banking system of the US. So you can't use the US dollar, you can't use the US bank. So you kind of stuck, because like I said, all the trades all around the world has to be done in the dollar. So the US was saying, Biden and everybody, the UK is saying, we're going to cut Russia off from, the US dollar, the SWIFT system and all that. So now it makes me think, like, what's going to happen from that? So, Putin has been basically giving hints a lot about cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin in general. He's been very much favorable of it the past couple months, which was weird, because a few years ago, Russia tried to ban Bitcoin. And then now all of a sudden, the past couple months, Russia been passing bills saying, oh, we'll regulate it, we'll make it legal, but we'll keep an eye on it. And it's just like a weird change of stance. So now I'm thinking, what if they use Bitcoin in order to get around US sanctions? As in, okay, you don't want us to use the US dollar, we can't use the US dollar, that's fine. I'll use Bitcoin, right? I'll use Bitcoin to buy, trade, everything. Now that's crazy to me, because now it puts us in a position where it's like, fuck, now Bitcoin is being used by the enemy, right? And that's, to me, Putin is the enemy, right? He's a warmongering maniac, and I will never tolerate a person like that, a politician or a president or whoever, right? If you want violence and war and hurting, citizens, I just can't get behind that. So to me now, Bitcoin is being used by the enemy. So now what? Well, the way Bitcoin was designed and built, it's built for everybody. That's why it's such a great technology. It's permissionless, meaning there's no gatekeeper. There's no one that's going to stand there and say, oh, no, you can't use Bitcoin. It's not like the US dollar. It's not like the euro. It's not like, everything else in the world, the banking system. You can't freeze. You can't stop people. You can't seize it from people. It's just is. It's just like something that's there, like the internet. You can't stop a country from using the internet. It's open source. It's just there, right? So that's the same thing with Bitcoin. And it's like, man, if President Putin decides to use Bitcoin in order to get around these sanctions, now it's like, dude, Bitcoin's being used by enemies, and long term, that will be good for Bitcoin. It's good for Bitcoin, right? Because now you have a nation, a large nation, not just like El Salvador, using Bitcoin as their main way to transact back and forth. And they'll probably buy a shit ton of Bitcoin because of that as well, because they know that we need to hedge with this thing. We need to buy more of this thing. So when that happens, yeah, of course, on the surface, it's like, oh, great, it's great for Bitcoin. But at the same time, on the other hand, it's like, what do the U.S. government do at that point? Like, what do they do? They can't ban it. They can't stop Russia from using Bitcoin. So what do? It's like their trump card, the sanction, has been undermined and has been basically rejected because of this thing called Bitcoin. And it's like, like I put myself in their position and it's like, what do you do? Like, not that I care, right? I don't condone politicians, period. Like, I think they're all snakes and they all just, they're all out for their own agenda, their own benefit and whatever. They don't care about nobody else except themselves. But you got to think, you got to put yourself in that position. Just think, what do the U.S. government do at that point? It's like, do you try to ban Bitcoin now? But they can't because there's too many politicians in the US, too many billionaires that own Bitcoin and speaks up for Bitcoin and endorses Bitcoin. You can't really do anything. You can't even ban it even if you wanted to. Like I said, we all should know that by now. You can't ban Bitcoin, right? But at the same time, Bitcoin is now being used by the enemy in order to, bypass your sanction. So what do you do next? I just think that in conclusion, I'm going to go ahead and conclude this video right now. I think that in the end, this is all a war over the US dollar, over the control of who has the power over the global reserve currency. Basically, Russia and China is saying we're tired of being under the US dollar standard, and we always have to like watch what we do, and we're tired of you guys always having the power. Why? Why should you have the power, right? So now they're trying to undermine that power. Now they're trying to, so then now it gives us an interesting position, and we, with all the stuff that's been going on with the COVID pandemic and all that, the money printing, the U.S. dollar is not as strong as it used to be, and I think Putin and the Chinese president, they all sense that, and now that's why they're making a move now. But we got to think, like, at some point we're gonna have to move on to a new global reserve currency. We might have to be prepared for that. And if the next thing is probably going to be Bitcoin, it's the most sensible, logical thing. And I think that any country that can see that first and can move first and start acquiring a shit ton of Bitcoin in the central bank, in their vault, and just lock it up and just secure their piece of the pie, that country is going to have a huge advantage in the future. And history books going to be written about this, and people's going to say, man, what country do what in basically the war for the next global reserve currency, which is Bitcoin, right? It's going to be a rocky ride. It's not going to be a smooth ride. This is crazy. Crazy stuff is happening. But I do think that that's ultimately where we're going to end up, is that Bitcoin will become the next global reserve currency. I mean, it's permissionless. It's open source. It's neutral. No one controls it, But even though no one controls it, the country that's the first to adopt it and acquire a shit ton of it will have the advantage. So even though they can't control Bitcoin per se, no matter how much they own, owning a shit ton of it does help as far as having their bigger piece of the pie, because there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin, and there's 8 billion people in the world. So I do think that that's where we're going to head to, and I do think that's ultimately where we're going to end up. But the road to get there might be very rocky. But I do think that at this point, we have to prepare for a scenario where the U.S. dollar might lose its reserve status. And even if it doesn't, like, I don't think that should happen. I think that it's great that the U.S. dollar maintains its status. It's good for the U.S. I'm an American, and I stand with America. But I do think that we need to find a way to hedge against a possibility that might not be the case, and we need to find some insurance, and that insurance is Bitcoin, because we all kind of see where this is going, right? And I think Putin sees it. I think the Chinese president, well, I don't know about him. He just shot himself in the foot last year, but whatever. I think that we see where this is going, and the first country to make that move will benefit greatly, because the first country to start buying a shit ton of Bitcoin, that's going to drive the price of Bitcoin up and make it a lot harder for the next country to get their piece. And then that will make it harder for the next country to get their piece. And it's a race at that point. And the first mover always get the advantage. So I think in the end, man, be careful in this environment, guys. I think that we all should like work harder, try to work as much as we can right now, get some income, get some money in, and save the cash for now. Save the cash, like keep the cash. I think cash is king in this environment. After this is all said and done, after the smoke is settled, Bitcoin will be king. But right now, I think we should be careful, right? We should keep our cash so that we can be safe and have an emergency, basically cushion in case, things does happen here or whatever, or we get affected by any of this, or the market just, start tanking, and then jobs are lost and all that. So that's my message, guys. I hope you guys get a lot out of this. Stay safe out there. Have perspective. Know that we are very blessed here in America, and there are people out there that has problems way bigger than ours. And just be safe, and God bless. God bless America.